Between 2019 and 2022, local businesses and entire industries suddenly closed their doors. The economic shutdown disrupted nearly every aspect of normal operations, including the ability to file and pay taxes on time. But the IRS didn't pause for the pandemic. They maintained standard enforcement, aggressively applying late fees, penalties, and interest to people and businesses who were struggling to survive. Take a business that owed $500,000 in income tax for 2020. Because of the sheer chaos of the pandemic, they simply couldn't file or pay that bill until October 2022. This graphic breaks down the IRS's original treatment of that delay. They added a 25% failure to file penalty of $125,000, plus another $45,000 in failure to pay penalties. The final bill jumped to $705,000. The agency treated a global disaster like a standard clerical delay. In the process, they extracted hundreds of billions of dollars in penalties from a population that was already on the brink. That aggressive collection strategy recently collided with the law. In November 2025, the U.S. Court of Federal Claims issued a landmark ruling in a case called Kwong versus United States. The court determined the IRS actually lacked the authority to charge these penalties. By law, tax deadlines were suspended during the federally declared disaster period. The impact of that finding is massive. Because of this single legal decision, an estimated $320 billion in improperly collected penalties and interest must now be returned to the public. The courts essentially redefined the legal boundaries of the pandemic. What the government classified as standard revenue is now a massive pool of valid refund claims. Looking at the statutory language analyzed in the case, the entire argument hinges on the phrasing of Internal Revenue Code Section 7508A. The statute explicitly says that during a declared disaster, a specific period of time shall be disregarded for tax deadlines. This document outlines the core conflict. The IRS argued this extension authority was discretionary and capped at 1 year. The court disagreed, ruling that the plain text is unambiguous. Once a disaster is declared, the postponement is mandatory and operates by force of law. Think of tax deadlines as a standard linear track. Under normal circumstances, you have specific recurring dates to file forms and pay balances. But the Kwong decision drops a massive block over that track. This block, the Kwong window, starts on January 20, 2020, the earliest incident date of the COVID-19 declaration, and runs all the way to July 10, 2023, which is 60 days after the disaster officially ended. For the duration of that block, the clock simply stops. Any filing or payment deadline that fell inside this window physically slides forward, stacking up on that final date of July 10, 2023. If you filed a return or paid a tax bill any time during those 3.5 years, the IRS categorized it as late. But under this legal interpretation, you were actually early because your deadline hadn't arrived yet. We can look at the right side of this graphic to see exactly how that time shift changes the math for the business owner who owed $500,000 for 2020. Because their payment in October 2022 happened well before the revised legal deadline of July 2023, the failure to file penalty drops to zero. The underpayment interest is completely wiped out for the same reason. That erases $205,000 in penalties and interest, turning a past punishment into a massive potential refund. This exact logic also applies to businesses that claimed the employee retention credit, faced an audit, and were later charged underpayment interest on those refunds. By correcting the timeline, the Kwong analysis takes capital that was improperly drained from the private sector and converts it straight back into available liquidity. The government is not letting $320 billion walk out the door without a fight. The IRS is expected to appeal this ruling, locking the issue in the courts for years. But that appeal creates a dangerous trap. While the legal system takes its time, the statute of limitations clock is running out on your ability to claim that money. If you look at the lower left of this slide, you'll see the hard deadline. Because the legal filing date was shifted to July 10, 2023, the 3-year window to file a refund claim closes permanently on July 10, 2026. If taxpayers decide to wait and see how the appeal turns out, their claims will simply expire before the final verdict arrives. The only way to bypass that trap is to file a protective claim using IRS Form 843. Submitting this document freezes the statute of limitations, locking in your right to the money while the Kwong litigation plays out. Filing that form requires pulling raw IRS account transcripts and reverse engineering the agency's daily compounding interest and penalty mathematics across multiple years. This document shows the 8 precise steps required to compute those claim amounts. To handle this complexity, tax professionals are now relying on specialized AI and fintech platforms to extract the transcript data and automatically build the legal calculations. If you or your business paid a penalty or interest charge between 2019 and 2022, you need to have your tax records analyzed immediately. The courts have put a historic amount of capital back on the table, but the IRS is only going to write those checks to the people who file their paperwork before the clock runs out.